morning, guys. Welcome back to Harvest Moon Farm. If you're new here, my name is Mickey, and today I'm going to be making a couple different things. I'm going to make some vegetable beef soup, and we're going to make some sourdough bread to go with that. I'm also going to make some caramelized onions that we can put in the dehydrator, and I've got some candies that I want to put in my freeze dryer and freeze dry those so I can have them for my kids on Christmas Eve. So we're going to start with our bread. So I keep my starter in the refrigerator because I don't make bread, every week or every other day or anything like that. So I took it out of the refrigerator yesterday and I let it come to room temperature, and then I fed it last night before I went to bed, and so now it is active, and that's what we want. So I'm going to use just a kitchen scale to measure all my ingredients. So I'm going to set my bowl on here, and then I'm going to zero it out because we want to measure each ingredient as it goes in. So the recipe that I have actually makes 2 loaves, so I'm going to just make half of it because we just need one. It's just my husband and I. So I'm going to add 100 grams of starter into my bowl. So I've got my scale where I can see the number as I'm pouring it in. Whoops! And that was way more than 100. So I'm going to take some back out. Oh, and that is 100 exactly. Then I'm going to zero it out and add 325 grams of water. And then you can do whatever flour you want to use. So if you just want to use all-purpose flour, you can do all of this flour in all-purpose. Or if you want to use something besides just all-purpose, you can add 300 grams of whatever choice of flour that you would like to use. I've got some whole wheat flour here that I ground. So I'm going to see if I've got 300 grams of that. And I'm just, rather than pour it, I'm just going to use a big spoon here. I think I said 300, I mean 325. Okay, so 325 grams of an alternate flour, wheat, spelt, einkorn, whatever you want to use. And then another 200 grams of all-purpose flour. So now I'm just going to use my dough whisk. If you don't have a dough whisk, you can use a spoon, a fork, whatever is easiest for you. And we're just going to stir this up just until it's mixed. It's just going to be the dough is going to be kind of shaggy looking. I probably should put my apron on. Just want to stir it enough to make sure that you've got all your flour incorporated into the water, or the water in the flour, I guess, whichever way you want to say it. So your dough should look kind of like that. It doesn't form a smooth ball or anything. It's just a real shaggy, that's the best term for it, shaggy looking mixture. And then we are just going to cover this with a towel, and we're going to set it to the side for an hour. And because I don't know when the next time I'm going to be making bread, I'm going to go ahead and put my starter back in the fridge. Okay, so now I'm going to get started on my vegetable beef soup. And the first thing I'm going to add is just some stew meat. And we bought a half a cow earlier in the year, and so I had some stew meat that came with my cut of meat. Normally I would just take a roast and just cut it in these small size pieces, but because I've already got these, I'm going to go ahead and use this. Okay, so now I'm going to add my vegetables, and I have a half a jar of corn here left over from our dinner last night, so I'm going to use the rest of that. And I am going to drain all of these before I put them in here. I will end up using some of that juice, but I don't want to use too much. So I'm going to go ahead and drain this corn. And I'll pour it in. I've got a jar of green beans. I'm going to go ahead and strain that. And I've got some frozen peas, and you can use whatever you want in terms of vegetables. You can use canned vegetables, you can use frozen vegetables, you can use home canned vegetables. You can use fresh vegetables if that's what you've got. And, you know, you don't have to put in everything I'm putting in. You can just put in whatever you like. And then I've got 2 jars of tomatoes. I'm not going to drain the tomatoes. I'm going to go ahead and just pour those in. And a little jar of tomato sauce. And then I just have some baby carrots here, so I'm just gonna cut those in smaller pieces and add those. I'm not gonna add this whole bag, but. So I'm just cutting them in sort of bite-sized pieces and putting them in here with the soup. All right, so I think that what I've got here is enough. All right, so I've got plenty of room in my crock pot here. So I can go ahead and pour all of this juice back in. I also put potatoes in here. I normally peel and cut up, or sometimes I don't peel, but I put in raw potatoes. I don't have any, I forgot to buy some more, so I've got some home canned potatoes, so I'm going to put those in later because I don't want them to end up mushy. So now I'm just going to add some seasoned salt. And that is the only seasoning that I add to this. You can add, if you want onion in your soup, if you want garlic, whatever else other seasonings you want to add, you can add those. This is all I ever use. But I'm just going to give this a stir to kind of mix it all up. My peas are kind of frozen in a hump, but they'll break up. Okay, so for now, that is all I need to do. So I'm going to set it in the actual crock pot. Put the lid on it and turn it on high. Yep. And then I'll just check that every couple hours, give it a stir. As we get closer, maybe early afternoon, I'll go ahead and cut my potatoes into some smaller pieces and add those. If you have some beef stock or beef broth, that would be a good thing to add. It just kind of helps with the flavor. But for now, that's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to let it cook. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make some dehydrated balsamic caramelized onions. They sound delicious. I came across this recipe last week and decided that I wanted to try it. So I've got 4 onions here, and I'm going to go ahead and get those peeled and sliced. Take the little tag off here. And I'm going to put my peelings in my stock bag for the freezer. Hopefully I can get through these without crying. I am super sensitive to onions, so we'll see what happens. And I've tried like running them under cold water. I don't know, whatever else I've tried. Nothing seems to work. One year I bought me some little kid goggles, like swim goggles, and that helped, except that then they fogged up and I couldn't see, so, and now I don't know where they are, so we'll just hope that I can get through these. So we just want to slice these pretty thin, about 1/4 of an inch. They don't have to be perfect, they don't have to be, you know, completely even. Just cut them fairly thin. Mine are actually probably a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch. I might make them a little bigger. And then I'm just gonna put them in this bowl that I had the veggie juice in. All right, I made it through 3.5 before I started having, or 2.5 before I started having issues. Oh my goodness. Woo. Oh. One more. Okay, so I've got all my onions cut up. I'm gonna put this bag back in my freezer. Woo. Okay, so now we are going to start cooking our onions down. All right, so we just want to coat the bottom of our cast iron skillet with some olive oil. And then we're going to turn our heat on, kind of a medium-low, and let that heat up. And once the skillet is hot, then we'll go ahead and put our onions in. So I went ahead and dropped one piece of onion in, and I think it needs to, the pan needs to heat up just a little bit more. It's just now starting to kind of, what am I trying to say? It's just now starting to kind of like fry when you put it in here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and add all of my onions, and it doesn't matter if the pan is really full because they're going to cook down. And so these first few minutes, we want to just make sure we're kind of moving these onions around in the pan so that they can get down in that oil and start getting coated. We want to make sure that they don't scorch. Uh-oh, I lost an onion. Make sure that we don't let them scorch on the bottom of the pan. And now that we've got our onions in, we want to keep it on fairly low heat so the onions are cooking really slowly. And I'm setting a timer just so I don't lose track. And I can see a few places where I didn't get that last little layer of skin off, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull that as I find it. This smells really good now that my eyes have stopped watering and my nose has stopped running. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes, but I am going to let them cook a little bit longer. There's still quite a bit of moisture in the bottom of the pan from the onions, and we want to let them cook until they just are kind of starting to dry out. So I am going to let those go a couple more minutes, and then we are going to add some balsamic vinegar. So it has been an hour on our bread dough. So what we want to do is we want to put about 10 grams of salt in a little container. And that's about 2 teaspoons. And then we're going to add just enough water to make it be 25 grams. And now we just want to stir this until the salt is pretty well dissolved. And then we're going to add this to our dough. All right, and then we're just gonna add this to our dough. Mine wasn't quite dissolved, so I'm just gonna pull that in there. Okay, so now we wanna wet our hands, and we are going to stretch and fold our dough once we get that incorporated a little bit so that we can work it. So it kind of looks like this right now. So what I'm going to do is just stretch that and then fold it over, and then turn it a quarter turn, stretch it and fold it over. And we're just going to do that until the dough starts feeling a little bit less sticky, and it will become a lot less stretchy. Whoops. As you work it. So mine is still a little sticky. Okay, so that's pretty good. So I'm just going to shape it a little bit into a ball here. We're going to cover it, and we're going to just let it sit for about 2 hours. Okay, so now we are going to take our balsamic vinegar, and I'm going to pour about a half a cup in my measuring cup here, just so I kind of know what I'm starting with. Try not to splash it all over the kitchen. Okay. So we're going to add a little bit to our pan of onions. And we're going to stir that in. We just want enough right now to kind of coat the onions and make sure that there's a little bit on the bottom of our pan. And you can, well, hopefully you can see they're starting to turn a really pretty brown color. I'm just gonna stir those really well. And you can see they've cooked down quite a bit too from when I first put these in. All right, so we're gonna let these cook about 45 more minutes. And we're just gonna watch them. We don't need to sit and stir them the entire time. We just want to keep an eye on them. And when they start to kind of dry out, we're just going to add a little bit more of our balsamic vinegar. So I'm going to go ahead and set my timer just so I don't lose track while I'm doing other things. And we'll check that again in a few minutes and see if we need to add any more vinegar. Okay, so while those onions are cooking down, I am going to go ahead and put some candies on my freeze dryer trays. I have the small Harvest Right freeze dryer. I've only had it for, sorry, there's like a fuzzy in my face. I've only had it for about a month, and I've used it a few times, and so far I really love it. So when the delivery service, when they delivered it, the lady that was my driver and delivery person told me that her brother-in-law freeze dries candies, and his favorite thing to do is Laffy Taffy. So I have some Laffy Taffy, but I also have these Jolly Ranchers. A lot of people have said that Jolly Ranchers are really good freeze dried. So I'm just gonna open up a bunch of these and put them on my tray. And once I get my trays full, then I'll go ahead and get these going in the freeze dryer. Try and make sure I have like a variety of colors here. Got one tray of, I don't know if you can see them, I can't turn it without spilling them. I've got one tray of Jolly Ranchers, and now I'm going to put together a couple of trays of these Laffy Taffy. All right, so I got some banana. My kids love the banana. I think they're disgusting, but my kids love them, so we'll do some banana. I like banana bread, I like bananas, I like banana things. I just don't like banana candy. Or banana milk. They drink banana milk sometimes. Ugh. Sounds kind of yucky, but they like it. Oh my gosh, I can't get the wrappers off of these. Alright, so all I could find were these sticks. So I'm going to cut them in about maybe 2-inch pieces. And then I have 2 of the sour apples, so I'm going to go ahead and do those. And I have grape, blue raspberry, strawberry, cherry, and this one that says mystery swirl. So I'm going to cut all these up in pieces and get them, or however many will fit on my trays, some of every flavor, and get them on my trays so we can put those in the freeze dryer. So I did just add a little bit more of the vinegar to our onions. Well, actually I added the rest of that first half cup, and then if they start drying out over the next, half hour or so, we'll go ahead and add some more. Okay, so I've got all of my candies cut up. Well, I have a few left, and then I've got the one tray of Jolly Ranchers. So I am going to carry these downstairs to my freeze dryer and get it cooling, and then we'll get these in there to start freeze drying. I brought up 6 trays, and I don't really know how many I'm going to need. So I'm going to start with 4, and then I'll have the other 2 if I need them. So we're going to just line them with some parchment paper. And the paper that I have is not quite big enough. So I'm going to just put a second sheet over there so that it's completely covered. But I'm gonna cut off the end where it's too long so it doesn't cause problems when I'm putting it in the dehydrator. So the onions are looking and smelling amazing. They have about 20 more minutes to cook, and then we'll be ready to start putting them on our trays. And now that it's cooked down more, I think 4 trays will be enough. But we'll see. I've got the extras if I need them. All right, so the freeze dryer's been cooling for 15 minutes. So I'm gonna open it up and stick my trays of candies in there. We're gonna close our drain valve. And then we're gonna hit continue. And it's gonna start freezing. So these candies will take about 24 hours to completely dry. So we'll check those again in the morning. Well, I'll probably take a look at them tonight, but we'll check them in the morning and see if they're done. Okay, our onions are done, and they are beautiful. They have a beautiful caramelization on them, and between that and the vinegar, they're a beautiful brown color. So now I'm going to just start loading them on my dehydrator trays. And you want to make sure that you spread these out in as thin, you want it to be a single layer as much as possible, because they'll dehydrate faster and more thoroughly that way. And you can still do this even if you don't have a dehydrator. You just prepare your pans, and you're going to put them in an oven that's set at 150 degrees. We might only need 3 trays. It just looked like so much more when I started. I didn't know how many I was going to need. Alrighty. Spread this last tray out, and then we'll go stick these in the dehydrator. So I'm going to put these in my dehydrator. So I have it set at about 150. This should take about 6 hours or so to completely dehydrate. So I'm going to turn it on 8, and I'm going to go ahead and come down and check this at about 4 hours and see how they're looking, and then check them every 30 minutes or so depending on how they look until they're dry. We want to make sure that they are completely dehydrated so that they don't get mold when we store them in a jar. It's been 2 hours for our dough, so I wet my hands a little bit, and we are going to just stretch and fold. So my dough looks like this now, so it's way stretchier. So you can kind of see that as I stretch it out of the bowl. So we're going to stretch and fold again. And we're just going to keep stretching and folding until it's too tight for us to stretch anymore. Doesn't take very long. Ooh, I think I might be there. Okay, so I'm going to kind of form this back into a little ball. I'm going to put it back in my bowl. And we're going to cover it up and let it rest again for 2 more hours. Okay, so this has it finished its last 2-hour rest period. So now we're going to sprinkle some flour on our work surface and go ahead and dump our dough out on our surface. Okay, so now what we want to do is pull the outside in and tuck it. So what you're doing is stretching that top side, because what we want to do is create tension on the top of this loaf so that we get a nice rise out of it, and when it bakes it'll be nice and tall and really fluffy. So I'm just going to keep doing this to this. I am going to shape this into a round loaf. So I want to kind of keep this into a round ball here as I do this. But I'm just going to keep pulling this so that this is creating tension on the top of this loaf. Okay, so now I've got that all stretched, so I've got a nice tight surface on here. I'm going to put it back in my bowl. We're going to let it rest 1 more hour. And we want to go ahead and cover it. We just want to cover it so that it doesn't dry out. So our soup is boiling here, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a stir. I did stir it earlier, but I'm going to give it another stir. And then I want to taste it and see if I need more seasoning. I probably do. I usually try to go light on the seasoning when I first start it, because I'd rather have to add a little more than wish I could take some out. We're gonna get just a little bit of this broth, and it's really hot. And yes, that does need some more seasoning. So I'm just gonna take my seasoned salt, and I'm just gonna sprinkle a little more on here. And stir that in. Get a clean spoon and give it another little taste test. That's better. So I'm going to put the lid back on. I'm going to wipe up this flour, and I'm going to go ahead and cut up my potatoes and get those added. And when I can these, I canned them without salt. So I just want to cut them up into the sizes that I want in my soup, and then I'll just add those. They are, because I canned them, you know, when you can potatoes, you have to pressure can them. And so they are completely cooked. So I didn't want to add them earlier, because then we would end up with mush, and that's not what we're looking for in our soup, obviously. Got all my potatoes cut up. Oops. So I'm going to go ahead and just hold this over here so you can see it. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a stir and mix the potatoes in. And I'm probably going to let this cook for another hour or so on high, and then I'm going to turn it down because I don't want everything to get mushy. The pieces of stew meat are just about done, so I'll go ahead and turn it down in an hour or so when I'm sure that the meat is done. And put my lid back on, and then I will just clean up this little mess I made. Okay, so it's been an hour. So now we are going to finish shaping our dough. So we want to flip this out of our bowl. Whoops, upside down, so we've got our sticky side up, and I should have put some flour down before I did that. And we're just going to do the same thing, pull and tuck, so that we make sure that we've got a nice tight ball of dough. I am going to put some flour in the bottom of my proofing basket so that it doesn't stick, so that it hopefully doesn't stick. So I'm just going to pull and tuck, just like I did before. And I'm actually going to take my bench scraper, and I'm just going to go ahead and go around this, and you just kind of push it under the edge so that it pulls that top surface tight. You just want to really make sure that there's a taut surface on the top of your dough. Oops. You just need to do this until you feel like you've got a good surface. So I think that's probably good. So now what I'm going to do is put it smooth side down in my proofing basket. And I'm going to cover it up. And now there's a couple different ways you can go. You can stick this in the refrigerator at this point and let it proof for 8 to 12 hours. Or you can set it on the counter and let it proof for a couple of hours until it's doubled and then go ahead and bake it. That's what I'm going to do because we want to have it with our dinner tonight. So I'll just set it on the counter, and if I feel like it's not rising fast enough, I'll go ahead and stick it in the oven with just the light on, and that little bit of heat from the light bulbs will help proof the dough. So that's all I'm going to do with it for now. And I did go down and check on the onions, and they still need some more time. You could still feel quite a bit of moisture in them. So we're gonna let those go another hour and check them again. Okay, so our dough has been rising for a couple of hours. It's not really risen as much as it normally does, or as much as I would like, but I am gonna go ahead and start preheating my oven. Okay, so I'm starting my oven. I'm preheating it to 450. While that's heating, I'm gonna go ahead. I've got my dish here and some parchment paper. And I'm going to, actually I should do it like this. I'm going to dump my dough into the parchment paper. And put it into my dish. And then, get this out of there. So then I'm going to take my little knife, I don't know what this is called, and I'm just going to cut some slits in the top of this dough, and that is just so the air can escape, the gases can escape, and it'll make that beautiful broken open top crust that you get on a sourdough bread. So when our oven gets to 450, we are going to put this in we're going to put the lid on our pan, and we're going to put it in the oven, and we're going to cook it for 30 minutes with the lid on, and then we're going to take our lid off and finish baking it for about another 15 minutes, just so we get a nice browning on our crust. Okay, so our oven is preheated. I'm going to go ahead and stick this in, and I will set the timer for 30 minutes. Okay, so our bread is done. It didn't rise as much as it has in the past. It's pretty flat, but it will still taste good. So I am going to take a stick of butter while this is still hot, and I'm just gonna run it over the top and let it kind of melt on there, because this will help keep the crust from being too crunchy. I like it crunchy, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it can be a little bit much, and so I just want to put this butter on here, and not only will it make it a little softer, but it will also give it a wonderful buttery flavor. Okay. So we're going to let our bread cool for a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and take it off this paper. I'm finished cooling on the rack. And then in about 10 minutes, we'll go ahead and cut some bread and dish out some soup, and we'll be ready for dinner. All right, so our bread is done. I've gone ahead and cut us some slices. I'm going to dish up some soup now. Ooh, look at that steam. These bowls are deceptively large. They're deceptive. They look like there's not much in them, and it's really a lot of food. Did not fill them all the way. Okay, so we've got our bread and our soup ready. The onions are still dehydrating. I must have had more moisture in them than the recipe says when I put them in the dehydrator. But once I've got those completely dry, I will show you what those look like. Okay, it is the next day, and our onions are all dehydrated. And they look like little crunchy pieces. And I did taste one. Really good. So you can use these in soups. You can put them on a roast. I think they would be delicious like on a burger. But I've got them in this jar. I'm going to watch them over the next day or so and make sure that no moisture, no condensation looks like it's forming inside my jar, because that will cause mold. So If I see condensation in the next several hours, I'll take them out and put them back in the dehydrator, but they feel pretty dry, so I think they'll be good. Our candies are done as well. So here are Jolly Ranchers. They a lot of them ended up puffing up like balls, so I'm anxious to taste those. And here are our Laffy Taffy pieces, and they look like maybe little pieces of chalk, or like the little Nerf bullets. They kind of look like that as well. So I can't wait for the kids to be able to try those. Our soup and bread last night for dinner was delicious. So I've got this big bowl of soup left. I'm going to put it in the refrigerator. I'm going to wrap our bread up, and then we'll have that for dinner again tonight. And then whatever's left, I'm going to go ahead and put in containers and freeze. So we'll have a quick meal of soup later on. It is supposed to be super cold this week here, so another night of soup will be delicious. So I think that is it for this video. I appreciate you guys taking your time out to watch me in my kitchen as I try all these recipes and, you know, make mistakes and make alterations, make substitutions, whatever. But I really do appreciate you taking your time out to watch me. I will link these recipes for the bread and the onions down in the description box. And I just hope everybody is having a wonderful holiday season, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks, guys.